Hello everybody, and welcome to the very first solo cast. This is a solo cast that is going to be a bit more off the cuff and free form than Waking Infinity News or even the stories, microdoses, the podcast, and of course the Friday night acoustic nights. These are all things that I really appreciate are showing different elements and aspects of who I am to you. However, I noticed that for myself, I go heavy-handed on one specific thing, and it's showing that there is conspiracy in the world. And I do get into detail, but the main thing that I am looking to do when I speak about conspiracy is actually the same thing that plant medicines, even meditation, breath work, or sports, challenges in general, cause for there to be some level of discomfort in our lives. Conspiracy is no different. And I'll get into the definition of conspiracy, which is basically two or more people colluding, usually in private, about plans and agendas that need to stay private for a while before they are rolled out. Let's say in a negative conspiracy, saying that we need to do something for the climate, or we need to do something for the poor people, or something for this pandemic. We need to do it, and here's what we're doing, and we're doing it out of altruism. We're doing it out of love. Hiding the real intention is a part of conspiracy. Hiding the true overall plan is very much so integrated in the human and social experience. The human and social experience goes back many, many thousands of years, and conspiracy is found ubiquitous throughout all cultures, just like slavery is found ubiquitous throughout all cultures. Only recently, as the world started becoming more industrialized and technology started doing the work of 1,000 men, did one group, technically it's the Caucasians, that dominated in the world of slavery. That also means that they dominated in the world of conspiracy. So what has been happening as we look at conspiracy, you can't really remove it from the entire litany, the whole story of humans and our society in general. Because you can't remove it, it must be understood that there is always a conspiracy going on. Always. Now, in human consciousness, there are several inbuilt programs that allow us to step out of truth, step out of reality. And these built-in programs are things that are like drugs. Instantly, they give us a very good feeling. Instantly. But then over time, those feelings start to dwindle, and it starts being less and less of a good feeling, less and less of a good thing. It starts robbing us of future good feelings. That's what drugs do. They give us all this dopamine, all this serotonin, all this norepinephrine, all this oxytocin, all up front for doing nothing other than injecting, inhaling, swallowing, or applying some kind of drug to us. And all that really means, all a drug in this respect really is something that enacts a very acute chemical synthesis within the body. And these cascades, they can feel glorious, but then afterwards, the reason why people have this afterglow, which is kind of a good feeling, and then it turns into a lull, which is kind of a deflated or depressed feeling, and then sometimes a deficient feeling, like your body has been literally robbed of some of the elements and the nutrients that it needs for you to simply be functional, baseline functional. So, one of the main things that I'm going to mention today is right now, mainstream media is not the cause of, but simply the main vehicle and avenue by which we are fed the drug of being able to say that no conspiracy exists. There's no conspiracy. Everything in government is either chalked up to ignorance, ineptitude, and altruism gone wrong. That's what people who believe there's no such thing as conspiracy, and the ones who continually put out this crackpot conspiracy theorists are saying that there's something going on with COVID. Crackpot conspiracy theorists are saying that there's something going on with the injections. Crackpot conspiracy theorists say that there's some conspiracy behind the banking system. And truly, when you really, really dig deeply enough into it, everyone sees that there is conspiracy. There are two or more people in tight-knit groups that have secrecy as a basis of a plan that is rolling out under the guise of something else. That's just the way it is. We don't have to say that that proves that there is an Illuminati, or that that proves that Davos and the World Economic Forum, or that any specific individual is the culprit, the main perpetrator. Like Bill Gates and Fauci. They're getting a lot of it today. However, when you look deeper, there is something that Charles Eisenstein calls the conspiracy with no conspirators. So what does that mean? The conspiracy with no conspirators means that as you look deeply, and Charles read into David Icke, I'm sure watched Alex Jones, and I'm sure has read many other people in the conspiracy theory authorship realm. And when you dig into them, like look at Jim Marrs, Jordan Maxwell, Michael Tessarian, you can go super deep into different offshoots of where conspiracy may come from. But the idea of conspiracy with no conspirators means, in the same way that Donald Trump was going to get into office, or somebody else was going to get into office, right? But the main point is somebody was going to get into office. Now, if you blame the president for what's going on right now in the world, but you're blaming the person, not the office, the category, then you're violating what Charles Eisenstein calls the conspiracy with no conspirators clause of how to explain reality. I like this because if you look at what schooling has done, and John Taylor Gatto has gone way deep into it, and in Charles Eisenstein's book, The Ascent of Humanity, he goes into this a bit, and I want to actually read you a few quotes. This is a quote by William Torrey Harris, U.S. Commissioner of Education from 1889 to 1906. 99 students out of 100 are automata, careful to walk in prescribed paths, careful to follow the prescribed custom. This is not an accident, but the result of substantial education, which, scientifically defined, is the subsumption of the individual. Subsumption is the process of absorbing something into something else. He goes on to say, the great purpose of school can be realized better in dark, airless, ugly places. It is to master the physical self, to transcend the beauty of nature. School should develop the power to withdraw from the external world. So this is the basis of when you have to look at the idea, the philosophy that guided education from the late 1800s into the 1900s, the same education philosophy that guided all of us through school, those who went to at least public school. Private schools, slightly different. Montessori school, Waldorf schools, very different. And we'll get into that because Rudolf Steiner and everything that came from Rudolf Steiner is one of the greatest philosophers, if not the greatest philosopher of all time. The man wrote more. If he would have sat for 60 years and wrote 50 to 70 pages a day, that's the only way to explain how much he wrote in his lifetime. He also did thousands of lectures, most of them for free. This man was an incredible philosopher, but despite whether you are into his ideas or not, Waldorf school still exists and really allows for the child to express and play at life. This is not what the educational system and the Rockefeller Institutes or General Board of Directors had in mind for the educational system for the masses of people. Let's go a little bit deeper into education before we move on into conspiracy with no conspirators. The Rockefeller General Education Board says, in our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility to our modeling hands. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. We have not to raise up from among them authors, educators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have ample supply. The task we set before ourselves is very simple. We will organize children and teach them to do in a perfect way the things that their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way. This was all in John Taylor Gatto's book, The Underground History of American Education, and John himself said, "A mass productions economy can neither be created nor sustained without a leveled population, one conditioned to mass habits, mass tastes, mass enthusiasms, predictable mass behavior." Tom Brown Jr. said, "The white man builds a shelter and it becomes his prison. He separates himself from the earth and refuses to budge. Therefore, he is always sick." This is getting into Charles Eisenstein's story of separation. So what Charles is saying in here is that all these agencies, school, daycare, sports, television, they aim to separate man from nature, to remove children and future generations from the memory of what nature truly is, the wildness, to turn us into something that only does something that other people have conspired to have these classes of people do. As you heard in the Rockefeller's General Education Board, we have statesmen, we have politicians, doctors, lawyers, we have that stuff set. The rulers of the system, the people who actually change what the system is, government, law, economy, that these things are already set up. We need people to move the gears, to do perfectly what their parents did imperfectly. The reason why this is super important is because we're talking about conspiracy. Is there really conspiracy with no conspirators? Charles says here that while John Taylor Gatto is absolutely correct that these edifices have, and especially the education boards, have caused for children and generations of children to have been removed slowly but surely, like a frog boiling in water, removed from the core essence of what makes us one with nature. How there is not some invisible force called spirit in nature. What we're looking at is spirit. But we don't look at nature for hours and hours and hours a day like our ancestors did. We look at man-made things. Of course we're not seeing spirit because we're seeing de-spirited people's designs and architecture around us. I've talked about biogeometry, and biogeometry is understanding that the shape of a room can actually cause for inspiration, calming, relaxing modes of consciousness, different modes of being, if you will. That the shape and form of a structure that you are in will actually cause for different aspects of your psyche and your spirit and your consciousness to emerge within that space. That just makes sense. It really does. If we and everything are made of spirit, that should only make sense. We are one with everything around us. And if we construct the space around us with a specific intention in mind, then that is like a magician with its altar and the room that the altar exists in. So the altar room, your room for magic. How do you create that? Is it clean? Is it organized? Does it represent you symbolically? That quote saying that school is best done in airless, ugly places is a direct violation of biogeometry. But if you look at our forefathers, Thomas Jefferson was into geomancy. He built a lot of structures, and I'll get into this in a future solo cast and possibly a documentary where he built structures that are angled on specific lines pointing all the way across the ocean to Avebury in England and all the way to Baalbek. And even beyond that, there are very beautiful historic hexagonal or octagonal forms on this very line. And they have points that actually aim at these other monuments. It's important to understand because not only does shape matter, but how shape and form and architecture in relation to other shape and form and architecture has a force and effect, not just on consciousness and those who stand in those places, but also creates a line, a ley line. Now, it was always thought that ley lines were just these natural phenomena, and that could be true. That very well is true. You look at anything magnetic and it has its own inherent grid pattern. That's incredible. However, we can manipulate that. It's shown that we can manipulate that. And that is where science, and worse off, scientism has gone. Scientism is the belief that you can reduce away from the unexplainable, and so you can make life into something that is superficially explained. Rudolf Steiner himself said, nothing in reality can be explained superficially. Nothing. So when you have scientism saying, oh, look, we reduced it all to this one little shot, this very complex thing that's happening in the world, that's affecting an immune system and a mass of people, which is a very, very complex thing. We've got the answer. It's right here. All you need to do is get it in you. So that is a very unsophisticated way to explain a very sophisticated issue. And that issue doesn't have to be a problem. Any more than a problem is a rock climbing wall. Literally, they call those different finger and foot positions on rock climbing walls problems. Not to discourage you, but to ignite that fire within you that, I know that I have the ability inherent within my form and structure to master this wall, but it is going to take time and discipline and overcoming not just my fear of approaching it, but maybe the tiredness that will come along with so many failures. How many times will I have to pick myself up and try again before I actually get it? That's the human spirit in general. So what I'm saying here is not only have these educational boards conspired, and also television and all these things that remove children from their parental family units and remove parents from even having the time to want to be around their children more. Now it's even more insidious with technology where you'll be in your house with your kids and still on your phone, not paying attention to a child that's going, Mom, Dad, come on, play, do something. And then they start acting up, and only when it gets to a certain boiling point do you put down the phone and say, stop it or you're going to your room. Think about that. This is where technology, from the point of view of over science and scientism, is angling itself directly at that narrow space between self and other, the human and the external world. I do believe that there is a conspiracy, whether there are conspirators or not, which I do believe there are, and I'll get into that very shortly. That there is a conspiracy to remove humans from our remembrance of who we are. And I believe who we are is God looking through a complex hall of mirrors, or a prism, if you will. When I'm looking at you, yes, right now I'm looking at a camera, but I actually feel the presence of you on the other side of it. So this camera, even though it might have been built by somebody with a terrible intention in mind, it's still allowing me to commune with you. So the conspiracy only works when I forget, when I see only what's in front of me, when I only see the camera and I don't feel your presence behind it. But guess what helps me remember? The fact that I've met many of you, and those that I haven't met, I hear from you. So what happens outside of this room and these moments where the record button is on, there's actually this connection that I still feel. There's the memory that this has done in the past and will do so in the future. Something beautiful. It will make a bond. It will tie a connection between us, because you will listen and you will think, and then you will speak to others, maybe speak directly back to me, but that this which is coming out of me is not my own, and that I looking at you is not me looking at you, it's God looking at itself. I have the ability to forget, but when I don't, I have the direct presence of you and all your ancestors and all my ancestors. And I don't need some proof, some scientific peer-reviewed proof. I don't need it. I don't care. In fact, this is one of those moments and one of those topics where I feel 100% solid. In my absence of physical, tangible proof for over-science skeptics, I feel confident that they actually know they're wrong. And they know that I'm right. But they have an agenda, and they have a conspiracy that needs to stay in secrecy. If it didn't, it would enjoy the sunlight and the open air, like truth usually does. So conspiracy with no conspirators. Is it real? Is it real? I'm speaking my ideas to you, but these aren't mine. Thomas Jefferson even said that an idea and the idea of ownership over intellectual ideas means that something has to be held in secret. Otherwise, it's a violation of what is, because once I come up with an idea and you hear it, once I speak it out loud, I put it into some frequency form, because even writing has a frequency to it. Once I do that, and it arrives at you, it's like a candle lighting another candle. One candle doesn't diminish the other by being lit from it. If I have a candle and you come and light yours off of it, that doesn't dim mine or rob anything from it, if done correctly. One candle can light infinite amount of candles, as long as there's enough time before it burns itself out. But then, once that one burns itself out, that other candle, those other candles that are still burning, can do the same job. And this is actually what community truly is. Now, let's go back. Conspiracy without conspirators. You could say, and Charles Eisenstein said that, John Taylor Gatto said in the book that none of this stuff with the General Education Board would have actually happened had Humboldt actually won his debate. And I think this was either in Vienna or somewhere in Europe. It was in the 1800s, but won his debate with Baron von Stein. And there was a debate that was very crucial to the moving forward of the General Education Board, too long to get into right now. And so Charles said, it seems that John Taylor Gatto is correct about what happened to the General Education Board and how it robs children and future generations of their connection with spirit and nature and others and the family structure, and how real education happens through play and exploration and curiosity. But then he said, but you can't blame these one or two little events on the entire thing. What brought it to the point where Humboldt was actually debating with Stein? What actually brought it to that point? It was a huge force and an undercurrent built by, yes, many other people, and therein lies the conspiracy. So yes, there is a conspiracy. Were there conspirators? Absolutely. There were many conspirators. Because we are the magicians. We are the creators of reality. But we are co-creating reality with other magicians. Think of 7 billion magicians in this world. They have ungodly power. And when I say ungodly, I really just mean something beyond our wildest imagination. We have that power. But so many of us have forgotten, and only few of us still remember. It is a conspiracy. There were many conspirators. It's true, you could not have the conspiracy without them. And you could say some of it maybe is subconscious, but the bottom line is we are all spirit, not just have spirit. It's not that just we have connection to spirit, but we are of spirit. We are made of spirit. This is spirit that you are witnessing right now. And what I am witnessing in you, because yes, I am witnessing you right now, even though you would call it in the future that you're seeing this, I still am witnessing the impact that this moment coming through me is having upon you. I already know to a certain extent how it will land. And that is because time and experience. There is no one person or many people that you can blame 100% for the entirety of conspiracy. Conspiracy itself, I'm going to go on record saying this, is a natural and important function inside the human experience at our present stage of evolution. The reason why conspiracy is important is because we don't understand what actual trust towards other humans means until we go through the gamut of experiences of what a lack of trust truly is. We actually don't understand, and this is something that I believe is happening inside the most positive expansion of human consciousness has to have within it the understanding of its own demise. And this is why we're actually in a good place in human history. Because when you're talking about a tapestry, it's not the perfect example. Think of a doily, because a doily is actually one string. And it goes through all these evolutions and tied in knots and going in different directions, and it makes it look so complex, but really it's just one string. So if you think about it, if that's a tube with the fluid of God moving through it, and you make a doily out of it, and then it gets so complex that out of it you could actually have humans and creatures that move around the earth without physical tethers. We're not physically plugged into the earth. We're allowed to move around, and we eat of the earth. That is our physical tether. So it's broken down by time and space because we are tethered to the earth at present. We can just take moments away from it. And this is true by flying and going up into the upper atmosphere. The interesting thing about this is we are never separate from God. We are never separate from nature. But the psyche has the ability to shift and adjust the hall of mirrors, or the super sophisticated prism that God is looking through, to hide God from God, to hide itself from itself. And in that, conspiracy takes hold. Because when we realize that as a breakdown in time and space, there's resources, and we only have a limited amount of time, supposedly, in this body. And I want what's mine. I want more pleasure. I want less pain. Pain is the precursor to cracking out of old, rigid behavior and patterns. Pain is also something that happens when we need to learn a valuable lesson. Don't step off that cliff. Don't put hand in fire. These are valuable lessons. Pain is the precursor, and it roots it into our memory. So, why conspiracy? Because the full beauty and gift of humanity is in true harmony and resonance with one another. That's the fullest gift, that's the fullest expression of the gift of humanity. However, when you remove the gift, you can't even fully remove it, but when you remove that gift from the memory of the individual, me, you, then we start to see the void between us. We see the separation. We start believing that it's real, and eventually, as with what's happening with our education boards and what's happening with daycare, childcare, sports, television, all the technology that keeps us rooted in the simulation, all the pretty things and all the lights and the changing and things that we can get from technology, convinces us that this is where the gift exists, in this smartphone, in this tablet, in this TV. But where the gift really exists is in full harmony and resonance between the humans. So, conspiracy does exist. It always has existed. It will not cease to exist until the next stage of human evolution is brought about. We can't conceive of what that is any more than a caterpillar has an understanding of what a butterfly does. We have no concept of what that will be. We are still rooted in solving, resolving, and bringing to fruition the full understanding and knowing of what these lessons of conspiracy and separation have in store for us. Because the pain of separation, the pain of the conspiracy and not being able to trust what's going on is the very fuel. That is what happens prior to the change and prior to the transcending of itself. So now as we're seeing it accelerate, as I talk about all the things in Waking Infinity News that are happening in the world, as I'm speaking about those things, I'm not speaking about them in a way for you to only feel fear, for you to only feel rage, for you to only feel the feelings that emerge when you feel like you have been wronged by other. But it must be put to you in that way. This is where most people, I believe, get it wrong. They email me and they say, Ben, fear-mongering, that's what you're doing. And I say, no. No more than ayahuasca fear-mongers when it brings up all of the pain and the trauma of your past and all the things that you've forgotten, that you've done, that have created a wedge between you and nature and others. I'm not fear-mongering. I am showing an aspect of the world that is an uncomfortable truth, is an uncomfortable reality. But the conspirator is us. So you can say there is a conspirator. It is only God. So Charles Eisenstein, he got it right in one level of looking at it. Conspiracy with no conspirators. Because if you look too closely and you point at Bill Gates and you say this whole thing is his fault, if you say this whole thing is Fauci's fault, you're wrong. If you say there's no conspirator at all, that this is just the human condition, you're wrong. And you're right. Because God can be such a paradox. But there is one conspirator. There is one person you should blame for the messages that I bring to you, for what Alex Jones and Jim Marrs and Michael Tsarion and David Icke and all these people, and everyone else, Charles Eisenstein all the way down to the non-believers, it doesn't matter. There's only one thing you can blame, and that is God. And that's you. That is me. Everything I do is a reminder of who and what we are. And the reason I use conspiracy to bring us there is for the very same reason that plant medicines dredge up the stuff we don't wish to live within anymore. But there's no such thing as throwing it away. It must be transcended. Meaning, it becomes the fertilizer of the next new. The death and destruction of the old is the actual impetus of the birthing of the new. You can't have one without the other. And the pain that we are experiencing right now is the very fertilizer and fuel that will bring about the harmony and resonance of tomorrow. I'm not sorry to bring you this news. It's actually very glorious. Unfortunately, most people, when they hear conspiracy theories, they stick in their primary first response, which is reactionary more than a response. And that's fear. It's binary. It's either believe it, keep looking into it, or believe it, don't keep looking into it, or don't believe it and don't look into it anymore. There's no use in being heavy-handed on one or the other. If you believe it and you look into it deeper, but you don't realize that there may be something to disbelieve in it, then you're too heavy-handed. If you don't believe it at all, and you don't want to believe that some of it might be true, then you're too heavy-handed on the other side. But the truth of the matter is in the framing of the question. Should you believe it or not believe it? Conspiracy theories. Doesn't matter which one I bring up to you. If I bring one up right now, 9/11, believe it or disbelieve it. And when I say 9/11, not that it happened, but was it an inside job? Believe it or don't believe it. Is that the proper question to even ask right there? Because truly, if we are God, it is an event, it happened. Some of the details of it may be more important to us than others, but a lot of the times when you dive down a rabbit hole of conspiracy, because that's what you think you need to do, you're sitting somewhere in Kansas and you believe you need to figure out what happened 21 years, or now still 20 years ago in New York City, because that's going to do something for you, unless you're going to write a book and actually solve something great, which is a huge feat, and most people will not be that person, then that's not the direction to go. So going far down the rabbit hole is not the direction to go. But understanding the timeless element of conspiracy, that it is always around, it will always be true. But when you try and point at it too directly, you're wrong. Sounds like a paradox, but it's not. Because conspiracy is here to help you awaken from those things that you would rather not see about yourself, because yourself is also the external world. This is where most people's philosophies break down. They talk about all the good stuff, and then when you say anything that might scare them, they say, "You're focusing on it too hard. Come back to your center." Where is my center? You could say my center is right in my heart. But that's the story of separation. Center, not just mine, but center, is everything in all things. There's a good aspect to understanding why there's conspiracy in the world. And soon, I will actually shift back into the direction of human potential. But the wave is not over yet. And what I mean by the wave is there is something very specific happening on planet Earth. I am obeying a trend and a wave. Because in that trend and that wave, it is so much easier to perform this act than that act. And so when you obey that wave and you bring people into the deepness of the pain of what's happening right now, then you're not robbing them of the experience later on. Nobody can solve the external problem of existence and human existence for you. You will always carry with you that level of deceit if you do not resolve it in yourself. You will always be the conspirator against others if you do not resolve it in yourself. It doesn't matter what others do. And yes, even though you may have children and they are new and they are sent off into future generations, your influence ripples deeper inside them than you will ever understand, even without a single word, even without a single action that happens in front of their presence. If they do not witness a thing of you, you've still rippled inside them so deeply that they will always and forever bring forth that which you left unresolved into future generations. Conspiracy is real. Conspirator is real. It's just not what you think. I hope this solo cast comes to you in such a way that it inspires you to take a look at the pain of what's happening right now as the very useful key that will unlock the transformation that humanity must go through right now. This next 10 years is going to be a big one. Very, very big one. I love you. I hope you all understand the depth of this message and understand that everything that I, this single individual, pretending that I'm disconnected from all of you as Ben Joseph Stewart, I hope you can take this message as what it is, my love for you.